Doop 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 doop. There's the man in the box right there. Let me look at this chat. You guys were talking about some crazy shit in there. What's going on? I've been waiting, YOLO. Much love from Mexico. All right. The days are going by faster. They may be, if you're paying attention to them more. Anyone see that video about replacing workers over the next 3 years that got their medication? I did see that video. How unfortunate for those oil and gas workers who may or may not be let go from their high-paying waged job, because the company likes to think in long-term investments. And maybe if those employees, might get sick or, addicted to drugs or, die from some kind of weird shit, you don't want to have those people working for you. You want the people that are going to be a slave for a really, really long time. Don't you know? Awesome. Favorite 2 hours of the week on YouTube. I'm just a lowly man in a box right here. Hey, there's another guy in a box back there. Check him out. It's fucking Max Headroom room. It's a real head blower, if you remember. I don't know if you remember that. Let's see, what do we got? What do we got here? Let me set up our show, yo. How about that? And hopefully David Dubine shall be calling in just 1 second. And maybe we'll talk about some weird things again. That's not what I wanted to look at. I have too many windows open once again. Alrighty, here we go. Ill prepared. YOLO, let's do it. Damn. On with someone else tonight. Here we go. Oh no. Let's see what. Hold on a minute. Things are just not as they appear. You remember Max Headroom? Those were good old times. You know what's cool about Max Headroom is somebody, hacked the television waves a long time ago. And they never did figure that out. It was just some weird dude in a Max Headroom thing, and he interrupted the live broadcast. It was kind of like that alien broadcast in the UK that, kind of took a hold of the television line for just a little while it said some weird shit about we better, be on prep for the apocalypse because, some bad mojo's coming our way. And they warned us, or it was just some prankster, I don't know. Let's see here. What are we doing? There it is. Let's go to this scene here. Which is nothing. Hold on 1 second. I have a technical difficulty. Please stand by.
I ran some of that computer chip shortage, or I should say the semiconductor chip shortage. I was watching Cliff High's interview with who was that USA Watchdog, Greg Hunter, and they were talking about there's a silver shortage on the industrial level. So the actual metals getting into, because I didn't realize there's an enormous amount of silver being used in the manufacture of that semiconductor process. So globally, the amount of industrial silver to be put into that process is being cut because, me and you and other people buying so much, and the whole GameStop people and the bullion exchange is trying to hold that so they can cover their, liquidity requirements inside the bullion exchange. So whatever happening, I can't believe that multi-billion-dollar stock-listed chip makers can't buy silver. Like, what is going on? So they're the.
Here we go. Sorry about that. I think I got it figured out now. Plus, I was listening to a private message. Let's see here. Remember, everyone, most people now believe the lab theory leak. That tells you right there it's BS. I think it was a lab leak on purpose. You know, they don't accidentally do these kind of things. Actually, somebody sent me a link to an old, it was like a 2010 Project Camelot video that kind of talked about all of this stuff. I think it was Scratch. My man Scratch sent it to me. Here, what am I doing? See, I got stoned and missed it. I'm going to add a source here so we can all, you know, enjoy ourselves. Here we are. I think I did it. What had happened was, guys, is I forgot how to do technical stuff after that last doobie. So just bear with me. Here we go. I think that's it. Yay. All right. So this is a link David Dubine sent me just moments ago. And I'm not going to read it out loud because you know how the authoritarianism people are. Yeah, they're kind of douches when it comes to, you know, saying things out loud. So you can read it yourself there. And let me check in the chat room and see what you guys are doing there. I'm sorry, I had to go black for just a minute. Must have been some good shit. It was. I think we'll talk about it here in a minute. Not that good shit, but the shit I was distracted with. What's with all the emojis, man? Like there's diamonds and hearts and aliens and wizards and like hand gestures and all that stuff. So what are you guys doing to prep? I'm just wondering. I mean, like, you know, if you're broke, it's hard to prep, I've noticed. It's a good thing I started years ago. Anyway, I think I got the phone set up. We're all ready to go. And here we are. Let's go back to this scene, which is me. It's me on the scene. Is there a consensus among mainstream media and the population? Then it's a lie. It's always the opposite. Well, I guarantee you they're not going to ever say openly that, you know, the sniffles was created in a lab on purpose and then just admit it. It's always going to be an accident. Even if they go so far as to admit that, you know, well, maybe we were doing some innocent research over here and, you know, some of our lab technicians just happened to come down with, you know, little sniffles. And then, you know, like any good citizen, they went to give it to other people, you know, on accident, on purpose. I mean, on accident. Purposely on accident or accidentally on purpose. I don't know. You guys shouldn't even be watching me. I'm a white dude. Haven't you guys been watching the news? White dudes are bad. Like, you guys should be banned for just fucking watching me right now. I'm a white male. I'm like, I think it's called a cis male, heteronormal weirdo. You know, because I'm like a percentage of like the population and stuff. What's up, blasphemous Buddha and Gilgamesh? Yeah, that's exactly right, Gilgamesh. They will admit something just long enough to make you up a new story about what happened or, you know, how it went down originally. According to them. You're probably, if you haven't watched TV in 21 years, you're probably healthier than everybody because, you know, they put that weird beam out. And I think all the streaming networks do it too. I may be doing it to you. I might be it may be like something that we cannot control. If you're watching a monitor, you're getting the signal. You know what I mean? There's certain frequencies. And matter of fact, I know that the blue light that comes off of all these screens can really do a number on your eyeballs. I should be wearing glasses, but I'm poor and like I just stare at the screen and squint and stuff. And then I got me a really big screen so I could see it. And then I realized I just quadrupled the radiation going into my eye. Actually, the healthiest kind of screen is a projector, which they kind of sell pretty cheap now. You can get a 1080i projector, which is like a non-resistive light. It bounces off the wall and then comes to you. So it's not the same as bombarding your eyes with radiation. Or blue light, if you want to call it that. You got a T-storm moving through, huh? Like the T-virus? You know, that's what's so funny is we're always talking about the apocalyptic times. One good thing is that we have a lot of crap laying around. There's just like junk everywhere. Stuff people wouldn't even know what to do with. It has no imagination. You seen those guys on YouTube that are making the little glass arrowheads out of the bottom of Coke bottles and jars and whatnot? I mean, think about that. They didn't have to go through 1,000 years of napping technology to evolve. They just, it's going to be an interesting future here. Let's go back over to the news screen so I can do some things off screen. Is it that thing in that thing that's causing the thing variance? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The world may never know. Look at these guys. I think you'll agree that that's some pretty trippy stuff right there. Those are all fake people, and this is kind of a light version of it. It looks really computerized. As I've shown previously on 420 TV, though, they can make some really, really realistic faces, so much so that you might want to question any mass event where you see loads of, faces that they say is people that are having troubles with whatever event was orchestrated here, there, or someone. Let's see here if we get a phone call. No phone call yet. There it is. Here, just right psychically as I said it. It was coming in. Let's see if we can get it here. There it is. I hear nothing. No. Technology.
Coming in here, forecast for next week, another Arctic blast coming up. Everywhere you look, the narratives are starting to fall apart across the entire sphere of existence in everybody's mind. And I don't care what your political beliefs are, what your religious beliefs are. Everything that we've been told as a human seems to be falling apart. You know, I know we've come into the age of Aquarius and the energies are changing with the grand solar minimum. We're moving into a new, more energetic star field area with a different part of the Birkeland current energizing our sun, our minds, as well as these changes across what we're seeing, the entire galaxy. But everything seems to be ripping into shreds as we move forward. There's not one single thing that's not affected by, wow, that doesn't seem normal. There are breaks and cracks rifting through every single possibility of everything we've been told since birth. And it's really key that it's all culminating, and this week especially is just full of new things that are happening. The Iraq departure, the whole thing with the voting machines. Taking a look at the information about the vid, all the new cures, all this whole thing with Fauci and this whole CCP thing. It just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, and then Taiwan's caught in the middle. So where do we go from here? The question should be asked is, what is the next great distraction to distract away from all of the things compounding and fracture, if you will? The stability and reliance of the way that narratives have been built since your kindergarten training, at home, in movies,
schooling, reinforced through jobs, training, whatever that is, moving yourself up the echelon if you're in the corporate world. That all shattered and we're all back at home now. But think about everything else that's falling apart that was from birth in training, that you believed one certain thing, one single aspect. Like the homogeny of the U.S. dollar being the reserve currency falling apart. We're going into incredible inflation and the U.S. dollar is being ditched. Like wherever you look, economic, societal, medical, science, climate, I don't care what it is, it's all falling apart at the seams, the way that narratives are trying to be held together. And the trust factor across everything is splitting and rifting as well. So where does that leave us in this next iteration? You got to really think, what's the big distraction going to be? If it's not a war, which I don't think it would be, what is the next distraction when all this information comes out and starts in earnest, the complete rift and shattering of everything that has been held as truth across societies and continents, races of peoples unite. Ransom, thanks for joining me. I'm curious, what you think the great distraction will have to be, because the amount of information flow right now is just a tidal wave that needs to be distracted away from, because society is shifting as we speak.
I think I figured it out with some secret research from a source of mine in the military-industrial complex, that Miley Cyrus is going to have a baby of George Floyd's, posthumously, of course. And this will enact a whole new level of loving and cuddling between us and the governments, and everything will turn out dandy. Not really.
Every little thing gonna be all right.
No, actually, everything I'm seeing is showing me it's like the biggest con on people ever, from coast to coast worldwide. I thought the last con was the big con, but now the big con now is that your money is actually worth something, and that governments care about you, and they're going to help you with disease, and they're going to help you with poverty. And what they're going to do is give you a big check every month. That check won't, actually be worth as much as it says it is, because, like you said, the Fed is just printing money like there's no tomorrow. Inflation is out of control. If you've noticed and gone to the store, prices in just the last week have got up about 30 cents on the dollar on some things. Like if a can of paint was $1, it's now $1.30 something. I mean, just overnight. And with one or two items, you might not really think much about that, but think about the entire economy as a whole. And everybody's doing this. Everybody's overpaying. And then you got a whole generation of people stuck on virtual reality and different things like that. I was looking at my kids' video games. It's like a giant casino-style psyop where the kid has to pay over and over just to get these imaginary things for the games that they play. So it's like an endless funnel of inherited wealth. And people just don't even understand the concept of the value of their currency right now. And then one day they're just going to wake up and there's nothing. And of course, that's where the fun begins. And that's, besides all of these other issues you were talking about. Just the money aspect, when you finally realize your money is a shadow of its former self.
Take you back to 1913, the formation of the Federal Reserve. And, by the way, the formation of the IRS in the same year. Coincidental? Maybe not. But I'll take you back to 1913 here. Now, you could have got an all-aluminum chassis, all-aluminum body, fully electric car in 1913. Yeah, believe it or not. Electric cars were the first vehicles made, and then they moved to diesel. So it still baffles me, just as a side note, that electric cars were built and perfected and operational and running from the 1880s and really got into their mass manufacturing in the early 1900s. And then it stopped. And I saw some amazing pictures of Knoxville, Tennessee, because we were running around down there the last couple nights, that had all the rail lines and all the trolley car lines all through the city, and then they ripped them all out, like the same thing they did over in Texas, fully rails all up and down the streets, and they ripped everything out. But back to the electric cars. So, electric cars were coming into their own after 30 years of production in the States. And they had and that was the thing. They kept them really incredible lightweight. They were all aluminum chassis. They had hemp included in hemp fibers. They were different types of hemp fenders were the thing. I don't know why they chose fenders, but there was hemp fenders, all aluminum chassis and body on in a fully electric vehicle in 1913. The price was $200. Now, if you bring that up to a Tesla today, and I understand there's bells and whistles and things look a little bit different and like, wow, okay, it's sleeker, whatever. 60 grand for that. So do the math. What was the loss of value on purchasing power? I could have got an electric vehicle in 1913 for $200 and I pay 60 grand now. Let me get out my calculator while you talk, Rance, and we'll do the calculation.
You know, and I know that wealth and money and all of this stuff is it's important to most people. But there's another topic that I kind of rag on to my viewers, and that's about infertility. And I think that's the best indication, really, of the overall trend of the plan that the elite have for us right now. And even in China, which you wouldn't expect with their population, they're having now infertility rate problems. So what's really trippy is, I know I've harped on this to my viewers, but just Google a little bit and find out who's the best medicated or the most medicated countries in the world. And then, do your own research and find out who's most involved in what we would call global governance. And then also, at the very end, just some sugar on top, find out which countries are going infertile or sterile. I would rather use the word sterile because it seems to me that, when you look at that pattern, you can only come to one conclusion, and that's that the populations of the world are being sterilized. Now, what does that mean? Well, to me, it means that the world governments are going out of their way to plan for a big event that's coming, and I think they all know it. And I'm not trying to be like woo-woo here, but it's kind of obvious. And I tried to send you a copy of this video that someone sent me, and it's basically the guy from Project Camelot talking about some military industrial complex source he has. That's why I was kind of joking about that earlier. But when you hear him and you realize that this is in 2010, you realize that all of these steps that he talks about are kind of done. And one of the main points of that was that there was going to be some kind of cold let go in China, and then it would slowly start developing in other countries, and that would give all of the countries in the world the opportunity to crack down with authoritarianism and gain powers they never had, and then they would have the public ready for what's coming. Whether it be war, some kind of massive geologic event, mass starvation, just because the planet's doing something weird, or any of these grid down failure. You can take your pick. The government has plans for that. And when I mean government, I don't mean like the United States or Russia. I'm sure they all have their own little pieces of a pie, but we're talking about world government, world governance. Every major politician from every country are using these words. And if you remember, when George Bush Sr. first said the words, "We need a new world order," what followed is every politician and world leader in the world talking about a new world order. Now they don't use that word because it's become like a cultural buzzword. So now they use stuff like global governance or things like that. What do you say, David?
300x is what you've lost on your purchase power if you're going to buy an electric vehicle from 1913 compared to now at 60 grand.
Wow.
I agree with you, but I lived and worked in China for a couple of years over there, and there was so much pollution anyway that was really causing a lot of problems even back 15 years ago. When I lived there and worked there, it got so bad I left because I just couldn't handle the pollution and the overcrowding and the bad food and the toxins and just ridiculousness everywhere. It was that they stopped you from taking bottles of water out of the country because they didn't want you to go test them. That's how bad the water was. And you couldn't get water tested in the country. If you wanted to get it tested, I think it was around $700 per sample to get tested. I mean, here in the States, you send in, it's what, $30? Same with soil testing and whatever. Like, you could do it here for nothing. Farm country, you go send in 3 samples across your plot, and then they'll tell you exactly what you want to put in there if you're going to grow your plants, and what they would need in terms of plants growing. There's going to be a lot of too much of something in soil, too little something in soil, but they really break it down chemically as to what your problems is or why things aren't growing correctly. But in China, they were so fearful of you getting that information that if you were caught bringing tubes of water out, like, you can put sample, you get they can bring some samples out if you had them in tubes. They would stop you in the airport and they would confiscate all your things and put you on a list, and you weren't allowed back in the country because you were trying to disservice China by showing the pollution levels. And I did a lot of photos and expose and stuff on when the peak oil time was around 2006 or so. I went in there. I was really more into seeing how China was developing at the same time as they were going to overcome the constraints on oil with incredible rising prices, which led into 2007 and 2008 and the collapse. But the problems with China's pollution back then, and that's the reason I'm, giving a primer here, why I was there and what time frame. It was so terrible and so polluted and so outrageously lowering of the quality of life in 2006, 7, 8 that I left because it was so terrible back then. Add another 12, 14, 15 years on top of that. Infertility was a main concern back then anyway because it was so polluted. But then you add in all the other things that we're seeing on top, and it's just unbelievable. Oh, and speaking of Project Camelot, on my Adapt 2030 channel, I did an interview with Carrie Cassidy, and we talked about the grand solar minimum and things spiritual on how the sun phase state change would affect the way humans are behaving. And this was about 4 years ago I did that interview with her. And sure enough, a lot of people are talking about the same thing. The sun's now starting to affect people's behavior. But, Project Camelot, they've been on a lot of really very quality information. So is Deborah Tavares, who I spoke with up at Alternative View 11 over in London. But there's some people who definitely see the future more clearly and have the full playbook, the full globalists, and it's a global governance. That's the whole thing, is how they pulled everybody in. It's not a global government as a single body. Well, I'm sure it is somebody at the top saying what happens, but it seems that if you want to stay in power at the global level, you have to abide by and not step out of line with the plan for the globe. Now, who's deciding that? There's a lot of conjecture. There's a lot of thoughts. But it seems that once it's decided, there's no one finger that points and pushes the button, because nobody would accept that across the globe. Like, you're not going to tell Indians would freak out. They're like, India, you're not going to tell us what to do. Modi's bad enough. And then America, you're not going to tell us what to do. So it's not a system of like one top thing at the United Nations. Nobody would accept that. Be like, yeah, United Nations, kiss my what. But the way it's put out is, on high somewhere the message comes and said, all right, global leaders, you all need to do this in your country. Whatever form it takes, you all do it. And we're all in the same, now use the same keywords, and it goes through the media. Then all the politicians get on board. So you can't really point a finger at one. It's almost like a crazy Medusa octopus thing, where if you cut off one head, there's still another to replace it, because only those people at the very top levels are at those positions on purpose. Like Ransom, you and I would be bad politicians because we would tell it like it is, and we wouldn't take any guff, and we couldn't get bought off, and it would be terrible for anybody trying to push agendas, because I wouldn't go along with that. I would call them out on it. So would you. I think I know you well enough to say that. And I think that, the people in power are part of a system to move forward some plan, but it can't be a single force, because then all the fingers could be pointed at that and say, no, we don't accept your global government system. But a system of global governance, CE, is quite a different thing than a global government. They get you in the lexicon and the modus operandi, the way they unfurl and unveil and put all these dictates into motion. It's very similar, but it's kind of splitting a hair on that.
No, I think it's brilliant that they started going through that. The elite seem to be really good at noticing what the populace finds out, and then they usually dump that person, that figurehead or whatever it is, and then they move on to another one that you don't know. Like, everybody knows George Soros, everybody knows Bill Gates, and you notice that now they're having weird issues with things, it's because they want people to forget about those or keep blaming them, whatever, if you're that far back. But like you said, if you have a worldwide governance, there's no country you could point at and go, it's your fault or your fault, because they're still counting on the fact that you are only on that national level and believe that the rulers of your particular country are really running things where you're at, and they're not participating in something bigger. But whenever you see the whole world, put a face diaper on, you know that there's something really going on. Like even our enemies, like over in Iran, you would think it'd be different. No, no, no. They were also, they were still hating USA and doing all their thing, but, they put their masks on, didn't they? Everybody was good boys and little girls all around the world, and that's the only time I've ever seen something like that. It was so fake. It was like one of those Coke commercials. You remember where they all held hands from uniting the world and whatever? It was like that, except for I was really seeing people all over the world in like a mass trance, all doing the same thing and believing the same things at the same times. That's what's so scary, and I don't think some people saw what I saw. I saw literally a world full of zombies, programmed to do a certain thing, and they did it. That's what's the most scary to me of everything, is like you said, what is the next big distraction? And then on top of that, what does that mean for the change in cultural, actions? What is the public going to change on next? It's like you have to be almost scared that the mob will find you on the next weird little distraction. Are you going to be on the bad end of that?
Well, I think they'd be on a bad end of my stuff too if they came on that, but I'll leave that off air. The think about how quickly they trained everybody, and I'm going to say trained.
Yeah.
Under duress. So think about when food shortages come in and you're going to be rationed on food, how quickly they could change you to, or train you, change your behavior for food allocations, food purchases, the allotments of food, and the frequency that you could purchase foods. And if they gotten everybody to this type of training that quickly, like you got to think of, Americans talk a bad game. You hear all the Americans, they never do this over. Take this, man. You can just buffing it up like rooster chest sticking out. You're not gonna do anything. We're Americans, And how quickly everybody rolled over. How quickly that occurred. It wasn't even like 1/5 of a 1/8 of a second. And even today, and I went into Knoxville again. I was saying the last couple of days I went up into Knoxville, Tennessee. And there were people wearing masks outside. And you could tell they were all of a certain political, because it was like more of a flag signal than it was actually anything, health related. Some people wearing 2 masks, and you just look at them and go, Would you just pop out of Oregon or something? No offense to Oregonese. I know there's quite a few out there, but that full leftist crowd out there and the Antifa thing. But that's the whole vibe in the dress style, but wearing 2 masks to try to put a point out in public. Like, come on, you're walking on the street and you're wearing 2 masks. You're like, sheesh. It's so far over here that nobody wear masks. It was completely 100% open. But how still trained and brainwashed these people? It's the middle of the summer, you're in open air, and you're still wearing 2 masks out on the street in like an open parking lot area. So such the strangest thing I'm witnessing here. So if you can get people to that level already, and how fast they rolled over with their freedoms, didn't even question it, didn't qualm it, didn't push back against anything. I'm waiting for the British. It's going to be it's going to be a melee when the British start. They're about at the point where this last extension of whatever it is going to snap it. England's going to go off. The British are just going to go so far off the hook of this is unacceptable that the police are going to be cowering in their stations, and you're going to watch politicians just cowering like they chased that CNN reporter down the street and he had to run behind police lines, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we see these kind of changes coming, what will it be when it's about the food? Because I think that's the whole direction it was moving. This first soft touch into how quickly you could turn a populace and train them and reorient their entire existence of what was available, and how you tweaked that, the fear that was put in to get the changes to happen. And now when we come to the food, which is going to be a real thing. I mean, after this year, are you kidding me? The amount of yield coming out globally is going to be so far under the break-even point this year that they're going to dig super far into the carryover stocks. And if a lot of you don't understand agricultural speak, let me explain in simple English. Carryover stock is a term that means there was some extra tons of corn or there was extra tons of wheat that was left over from last year. So it's still in the silo. It's still physically there. But they bring it in for sales from the next year. So if they harvested it in 2020, it's still there this year, 6 months later, and it's still for sale this year. So they call that a carryover. So it carried from one year or moved from one year to the next for a sale. So the carryover stock, and this is kind of a keyword you'll hear a lot in grain trading. The carryover stocks are how much available grain was left over after everything was sold. All the factories got their allotments. You and I, we ate. All the animals got their food. And then there was still some left over because the world overproduced last year. A sliver. And I mean, it was at pretty much break even. You know, whether you trust the USDA numbers or not is to be disputed. And please take this all with a grain of salt in terms of the numbers that you're seeing. But the numbers from last year were break even or even 1 million tons down from production. So think about that for just a second. Last year, we didn't produce enough food to feed the entire world. Or if we did, it was exactly at the break even point. So this year is atrocious in turn. And when I see grain forecast, you just don't see words atrocious used in a grain forecast normally. But this is what they're looking at this year. Mega droughts down in Brazil, which would usually be the savior. So if somewhere in the northern hemisphere can't produce enough, there'll be these other, side producers like Argentina, Brazil, Australia, that'll pick up a bunch of slack because they usually push in another 10, 15, 60 million tons, right? But they're not. This year, everybody in the southern hemisphere that would be considered the savior basket is not there. They're all in incredible lowest in 50 years, lowest in 30 years, incredible declines. Like Brazil lost at least a quarter of its production to be announced on the final reductions. Could be higher, could be upwards of 50%. And the northern hemisphere is, as was termed, atrocious for the crop reports and the planting. There's been too many floods, too much drought. Everything has been delayed. It's still snowing in so many places. And we're just not going to get the crops this year. So if last year was a break even, this year is going to be like tens of millions of tons under what the world needs to feed itself. So mark my words, anybody listening out there, it's not me. Look at your own data, do your own research. But this is the year we've rolled over to. We do not grow enough to feed the planet. So what they're going to start doing is dipping into those silos, into that stuff called carryover stock. That's the most important number you need to look at. Because from this point forward, we don't grow enough. So what you need to look for is carryover stock reductions. And when you see that thing dipping by 50, 100 million tons, you need to watch out and start adding those numbers up. Because when that goes to zero, we got nothing left. And what we grow is what we get. And the reason I gave that long answer is because when it gets to that point, you'll understand why everybody was trained for COVID. Because you're going to be standing in a line trying to get food. They're going to scare you and retrain you into you stand here on Wednesdays, you get your ration cards, you don't fight or you get shot in line because the army's there. And this is the way it's going to work because we can't feed everybody. Now, were you a good citizen on your social credit score? You get a fresh apple. You were bad like Ransom and David for talking about these things. You don't get an apple. That's where it's going right now. We reached that rollover point. You wonder why so many changes are happening right now and all this week, especially with the political changes from the voting machines to the reduction, pull out in Iraq, and just so many things happening. The Fed's coming out saying our dollar's worthless. It's declining. What's going on this week is something massively, there's got to be a huge distraction. And the food and the political distractions and where we're moving to in the future. You need to watch those carryover stock numbers declining because remember, we're at the 0 point now. We can't grow enough to feed the planet. We're getting our extra food to break even is in the stored food. And that's a scary thing to think about. 3 years or under. And I'm done, Ransom. I'm sorry, I rant a little bit sometimes when I'm talking about ag.
No, I was absorbing all that. You basically were talking about empires failing. I mean, you think about it.
Byzantine.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm going to go back and make a huge bold call here.
Right.
The amount of change coming up with starvation of a society and the shift of an age, you need to look at the Byzantine Empire. This is the amount of change and collapse we're moving into. Forget the Romans, Byzantine Empire.
Right. Well, yeah, the whole thing that you were talking about, you know, is basically reserve. And when they start using reserve, that means there's nothing new. And you were talking about what's the next big distraction. And I think I sent you this about all of the Sahara dust blowing over here. And an ironic thing is some of these, it's funny because, you know, it wasn't that long ago that the volcano was spitting up stuff in the other direction, right? And then here's the answer back, it seems like. I don't know how much actual dust is going to come with this, and if people in Florida, you know, it just shows a little band going over there. But if some of these bigger patches kind of make it into mainland, you can expect a bunch of rain and flooding, I would assume, because of it gathering with the moisture. But this aside, you were talking about Brazil along with us. And when you were talking about those carryover numbers, you could look at those same countries I was talking about that are the most medicated. And you'll find out that those are the ones that also have the large stockpiles of backup food for companies, for government, etc. But when all of that's gone, it's kind of like what was going on with the meat. Now, maybe you can explain this to me because I watched like 3 hours worth of it and still couldn't figure out exactly what they were blaming our beef shortage on. But I was watching this thing and they kept talking about how the hackers hacked into them, which caused all of these other problems, which caused a big reduction in the amount of beef that we were about to have. Also in this next year, where you're talking about amounts of grain and things like that. So it's not just like the grain, it's the beef. But how can hackers hacking something cause beef shortage in real life? I mean, the cows are out there, they're eating, they're oblivious to the fact that they got hacked. Is the company just not feeding them? Or is it like before when they were just destroying the beef so that they could claim insurance on it and things like that, and then also say that, hey, they don't have enough to bring to market now?
All of the above.
All of the above.
See, now the hack is a convenient excuse, and I am going to go woo here. It's convenient that I'll give a specific example. This is in North Dakota, and I was actually working on a video which I'm trying to put out tonight after our show here. Up in North Dakota, they were talking about the regular auctioneers, but because there's such a drought going on, and water is being incredibly rationed on the industrial level, including agriculture for vegetables, but it also goes over into the cattle ranching, that the average sales for this particular week over the last 30 years has been 400 head of cattle that will auction for slaughter. This week, it's almost 5,000. And the reason is the drought's intensifying to the point where they can't even get enough water at a cost to keep their cows alive. Forget the feed. Just to buy the water to push it into so the cows can drink water to stay alive. So they can't even afford to keep the herds watered. Now, that's a huge statement. Okay, getting them hay, which is, you know, over here in the east part of the country, the hay is just, it's the best hay they've had. And, you know, I'm looking at like, we're going to be doing at least two cuts this year. We're going to already cut the first. I couldn't believe how, and it's just, everything is growing so incredibly well here now until next month when it's supposed to come into a drought. But up in places like in the West where they're having a drought, they got no hay, they got no water, there's no feed. Corn's getting really, really, really expensive. So if you're going to try to feed your animals using a grain supply, you're getting priced out already, because look at the prices of everything. Soybeans at $13, corn at the highest almost since in the last 50 years. Almost every grain that you're looking at, wheat, corn, soy, is at near all-time record highs. Now, I don't care if you're going to feed pressed cake to your cows off a soy meal run, or if you're going to do bad, processed grain residuals, but a lot of times they use that for milling and, or I shouldn't say milling, but distillations and whatnot. Even if you're going to ferment that and feed it to the cows, you're getting so priced out of the market that it's barely even a break even if you're going to feed them with grain now, because the grain costs too much at record prices. Now add in record water prices and record hay prices. These cows, they can't be held anymore. The cows are going to cost you, the running cost on putting a cow right now is about 3x more than what you're going to sell it for. So you're going to lose 2x more money than you put into the cow. So let's say to buy the feed and whatnot, it's going to cost you $3,000. You're going to get $1,000 for the cow because beef prices are going up incredibly. They're all selling the herds because they can't keep them. It's too expensive. And just magically, there's a meat hack, which slowed down production of it. Again, the meat hack slowed the production of the sales from the auction houses out there. Anybody who likes cattle auctions in Corbett Wall, his guy's name is Corbett, Corbettwallo. He's the best out there. He runs a place called DV Auctions, and you can find him on YouTube every day. And he'll run you down on all the cattle pricing, all the hog pricing, and take you through the full meat industry. And by far, he's my number one source that I go to take a look at what's happening on the cattle front. But he's down around Oklahoma in that mid-Texas area. But he'll get you all the way up to all the way up to North Dakota. And a huge amount of stories are coming out about North Dakota cattle ranching. There is such a constraint on production for anything in animal husbandry due to crop price record pricing right now. Even if you want to get chicken scratch, it comes from grain somewhere. And with grain prices being all-time high, the damn chicken feed's at an all-time high too. You know, it used to be like $5 for a 30-pound bag, or if you went to the farm co-op and you'd be able to buy with somebody else, you guys could get tons of that and cut it up, and it'd be much cheaper. But even that's coming into the prices where I hear farmers talking in the grain co-op, because I go in there a lot and I buy seed. There's no iron peas this year. There's no beans. There's no peas are gone. You can't even pre-order anything. I mean, even me as a guy who has a small farm is looking for like cover crop of iron peas and beans. They don't have anything. It's unbelievable. And I hear these guys complaining, talking about how expensive the chicken's feed's getting. I'm like, chicken feed, dude, that's the lowest price stuff you can possibly get. It doesn't get any cheaper than chicken scratch. And when chicken farmers are talking about how expensive it is to get their chicken feed in there now, and you want to compare that with somebody who's raising cattle, are you kidding me? That's such a night and day difference. Cattle versus chicken. I mean, the inputs there are just monstrously different on those two animals. We are going into a massive shortage of beef. I'm telling you what, Ransom, if you're not raising your own cattle, if you're not raising your own meat product, you're not going to get it. It's getting too expensive for the farmers because the auction houses are still stuck at paying a certain price because the onward slaughterhouses are going to only pay a certain price. And then they're gouging you, the end customer, is paying double or triple for any kind of meat that you did last year. And it's this whole circle jerk going around on locked-in pricing. So I don't know where it leaves everybody, except, you know what, if you're listening to this broadcast, you need to prepare yourself for coming into some real difficult situations for not only growing the crops and getting them in the ground. They're expecting snow through some of the grow zone this year. I mean, this month coming up through the end of this month and into July, they're expecting snow in areas in Canada where they grow crops, as well as the Rocky Mountains area. Record cold coming through with another Arctic blast. And you got to expect 16 degrees Celsius below normal temperatures is something like about 40 Fahrenheit under the normal coming up over next week. Another Arctic blast. Now, I understand in Tennessee and Florida and Texas, it's not going to get that cold to kill the grasses that are coming out, whether it be wheat grasses or rye grasses, whatever it is. But some of those places a little bit further north, like Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, and all those places further north in Canada, you get another Arctic blast, it's going to send temperatures below zero. We lost an enormous amount of crop. There's not going to be enough time to replant at this point. You can't not put another crop in the ground in July and expect to harvest at the end of August or in the beginning of September when the early snows are going to come again. And the early cold's going to come again. They're going to they stranded like 25% of the crop out in Canada last year. 25% got stranded. And I'm going to rant on a tangent here. Now, stranding, just simple words about stranding means let's say you grow a field of corn, or you grow a field of soybeans, or you grow a field of canola. And it grew and you replanted like now, the same scenario, and then it was growing and you were planning to harvest it, but early snow came in and it kept snowing and it got cold and it kept snowing. and it might have melted, and then your field was too muddy to go in and harvest it, and then it snowed and it turned to winter and everything iced over. Well, you didn't get a chance to harvest your field, but it's going to stay there. It's going to be frozen the whole winter. And then finally, in the springtime, when it dries out enough for you to get your tractor in there and your combines in or whatever you're using to harvest that, you can get some sort of harvest out of it. They call that stranded. So when you look at how many crops are stranded or how much acreage is stranded, you got the 25% last year is not a good strand rate. You know, how do you strand 25% of the crops in the ground and say, oh, well, and then here's the USDA with their fake numbers. They counted that as booked yield. I mean, they counted it as the farmer went in and cut it with their combine, dried it out, put it into the bags in full tonnage, and then weighed that out. They just did an average on how many acres were left, and the stranded crop got counted as good count. And see, this is why I say a lot of the numbers with the USDA doesn't make sense, because 25% of the crops were stranded in the canola crop. I'm going to use canola as a specific example, and like places like Alberta. 25% of their entire crop last year was stranded, meaning that they got rocked out and their entire crop was lost due to a very late freeze. Took everything down to zero. They all replanted, but then they couldn't get the harvest in before the snows and the ice came again. That thing had to overwinter the entire winter, and then when it got back in the summer, I should say spring after the winter, they couldn't get it out because it was too muddy. And then now finally it's dried it up enough just as we consider summer for them to get it. But they're not going to be. That was almost a total loss. Some of these guys that are now harvesting from last, they're only getting 10%. But the USDA booked in a full 25%. Like they're putting 100% of stranded crops as yield coming in, but really the numbers are something like 10%. So this whole fictitious numbers thing, and if we're seeing this again, this is a 2.0 from last year. And it's actually a little bit even more ferocious than last year. So the way that these farmers are going to have to replant everything and get those crops stranded again and then expect that to be harvested and booked in and like good quality food? No. So this explains why, A, there had to be a meat hack on the computer system. They had to slow down the meat processing somehow. B, record crop pricing is locking in and farmers can't. They're selling everything at record price lows now because they just have to sell their herds. There's no way to keep them. But those herds, once they're sold, that's it. There's no more herd coming back. It takes 2 years to bring herds back. So where does that leave us with meat pricing, hogs, chickens at all-time high for the feed price? So now what? Like you can see where this is going, and then the actual crops in the ground to keep that whole system moving in the beginning, we're back to the baseline where it's going below what we produce is what we eat. Like this is a serious problem we're heading into, and nobody's talking about it. And then, you know, you got the whole COVID and you have to stand outside of your supermarket and you can only buy this much and you're rationed to one, you're rationed to two. And the way they retrain the society, you can see exactly what's happening on how this is working. We're coming into the food dearth. We're coming into the food shortages. We're coming into all this. And it's dovetailing and overlayering. And if you can't see these two are related, and the world's moving to this point right now, there's got to be a bigger distraction, Ransom. And I'm sorry, man, I just talked too long.
No, actually, you know, I'm right on track with you. And, you know, kind of before you went off into all of those different games that are played to reduce the number of products that come out in an artificial way. And then on top of it, there's natural things going on. But, you know, you're talking about all the water. And I was showing them, you know, how California is dumping like 90 to 70% of their fresh water. And then they're talking about they're in a drought and they can't grow crops. And, you know, if they have beef out there in California at all, they're probably having trouble with watering it. But then the state's dumping all the fresh water out into the ocean. But don't worry about it because right here. And somebody was joking about
that one doesn't make sense to me, right? They're squawking about all the Sierra Nevada snowpack melting. Okay, great. It goes into reservoirs.
Yeah.
But then you're right that they're opening all the floodgates and just emptying all that water into the ocean and leaving nothing for the farmers, and they're claiming it's a drought. Well, wait a second. That's an artificial drought if there ever was one.
Exactly.
Because those reservoirs were at the normal levels they were after the snowpack melted. Now, what happened to all the water?
It's for the fishes. No, they're not going to let you.
It's an artificial Food shortage. Man, I'm telling you, we're being driven into artificial food shortages. Maybe you'll have to get the jab to get some food. I don't know. Get a jab, get a steak.
No, it's worse than that. It's like, you say it's a little bit woo-woo about everybody getting used to, rations and waiting outside the store. But then, you see, I have a weird brain. I put these things together. All of these 3D printing meat factories, they're going to get people used to, having fake meat that they grew in a lab because that way they can control the exact proportions. And somebody in the chat was joking about it. There's actually a company, and I've seen it before, where you could grow cells of your own and grow your own meat made out of you inside of your home because you don't leave. But on top of that, if you do go outside, no, that's the wrong one. Here it is. I got my articles mixed up, but anyway, I think it's this one. Too many of them. Anyway, I was looking at how the military is now thinking about using uniforms that will track your every movement, like all of it. So it'll know if you're sick, it'll know if your temperature's up. And this is just a new kind of fabric that has ultra fine fibers in it, little digital cables, and it can sense everything. So if you think that the military is going to be the only one wearing that, you're kidding yourself. This will be in every clothing line that Walmart and all of the others offer. So forget about your phone spying on you. Your clothes will spy on you. Where you go, what you do, what you're saying, whether or not you're sick, if you took your vaccines or not, what stores you go to, if you're in the wrong place in a restricted area. Because mark my words, that's also coming. Restricted areas. Because private corporations are all over the world, from Guatemala to the United States, trying to start private smart cities where they have their own laws, their own rules, and they run every, cafe, they run the news, they run every little job in that town or province that's owned by a corporation will be, everything managed by that corporation. So it's like owning your soul to the company store there, as they used to say. And this is the kind of stuff that people just aren't ready for, is next level technology that's actually kind of old. And I realize that when I talk to people, that everybody's still living 50 years ago. The amount of technology is so far beyond what we're even talking about. We shouldn't have any of these problems. And then you add that to companies, trying to talk you into eating fake meat that they made at the same time as calling you racist for eating the meat, and then just make the meat unavailable. And these are all just excuses to control people. Like Henry Kissinger said, we'll use food as a weapon. And I believe someone else in the Bolshevik Revolution also said the same thing. We'll make food a weapon. And then by the time Stalin came around, they were literally starving people out. And that's all they were dying from. It only took a couple years to kill millions and millions of people just because they had an empty belly and no nutrition. So yeah, you can put all of these things together. And I think people are really naive, and they're in denial that we're in such a sophisticated technological future, and also the same reality that they're pulling the plug on civilization as we know it. And I hate to sound gloom, but that's just really what I think.
Yeah, we're being set for a reset here. But think about the body's electric field. If you're going to talk about all those cables running through the clothes, because you've seen it from Logan's Run all the way to Star Trek. Yeah. They always wear those kind of one-piece bodysuits, and it doesn't matter what futuristic sci-fi movie you're in, they always have that. But, think about the body electric field, how that would be affected. And then what kind of metals would be involved in the production of that? If they don't have enough silver right now to continue to produce the chips that are needed for the semiconductor chips, I mean, what kind of constituents or what just base product commodity is going to be used in the production of that clothes? Like, you're talking about putting a fiber optic cable. I mean, how much high tech is that going to be to run it at that, thread thin level there to weave it in the clothes?
Nano.
It's such a nanu, right? Even Mork from Ork or whatever, a guy living in Colorado, was that Robin Williams, the guy that did that TV show back in the day. Again, he was always wearing that one-piece thing too. Yeah. So what is it about that one-piece bodysuit that it's everything futuristic? Are they really tracking everything?
If they just wrap that whole thing around, all the way around your face, then we won't even have identities, or no one could say anything about races or what people have for an opinion or none of that. We'll just erase everything that defines us as individuals and humans, and we can just wear a big bodysuit and go around and say, resistance is futile. I mean, we laugh at that, but every show I watch now, and I don't usually watch TV, but lately I've been doing it just to do it. And we started a new show on Amazon, in which like the second or third episode is a futuristic dystopic society where the autofact is what they call it, but really it's Amazon. And it's funny that it's on Amazon talking about Amazon. And in the future, the autofact just keeps sending products to people, even though they don't need it. And it continues to, soil the earth and pollute and take up more and more space with products and factories. And the people don't even want the products anymore. It's long after we killed ourselves with nuclear weapons, and the remnants of society are sitting there getting Amazon deliveries all day. And it's just weird. It's like they joke in our faces about how far we've come. It used to be sci-fi predicting the future. Now it's the past that sci-fi is pretending is in the future.
Sounds like we're already living in that garbage world where, I always find it so funny because I talk about the effects of the sun driving our climate versus CO2 driving it. And through history, when you look at the rise and fall of civilizations, it's always on the sun cycles. And when you go further back, whether it be, de Vries or Bray cycles or Gleisberg cycles, something longer than the 11.5-year average solar cycle from solar maximum to solar minimum. You have longer duration cycles that intertwine and eventually overloop on kind of a harmonic wave where you get several cycles overlapping, like we're coming into these next 3 years. On 2024 in October, we're going to have several multi-decade, multi-century, and multi-millennia cycles vibrating and overlapping even with the 11-year, 1-decade cycle. But think about that. Because coming into that whole mind frame where I'm at, everybody is talking about CO2, it's global warming, CO2, global warming. But, the same thing. If you watch TV, it's like, hey, there's 2 on sale right now on Amazon. Why don't you get 2? But it's the same whole corporate responsibility garbage that you're looking at every day of, oh, we're a sustainable company. But wait a second. You're the ones pushing all the advertising and all the trinkets of junk that people are buying it. Then you're complaining about CO2 warming the planet. And it's just a rinse and repeat, because let's say you watch a Super Bowl ad and everything's about buy this, get an extra one of this, get a new car. This whole thing about get a new car, how many car advertisements are on TV? And the same thing, like, don't get a car, it's CO2, it's warming. But then, how are these corporate valuations based on selling junk to the populace that they brainwash through the advertising to buy, even though they're giving you a diametric opposite message where it's CO2, wait, you're killing the planet, you buy 2 because they're on sale. And, we're looking at the same thing, just in a real time sense here on any nightly program that you would watch on TV, if you do watch TV, versus, this, the past is the future, the past is almost like, Planet of the Apes going down in the layers a little further back is our future.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a sci-fi, but that's what's funny is we're still trying to convince people that, them living their normal lifestyle is not what's making climate change, and that climate change has constantly happened on cycles. But you can't tell some people that. They think, if you eat a steak and you fart, that you're evil. And that's kind of a joking way, but all of the programs meant to guilt trip the public into thinking that somehow they're responsible for what the sun does is one of the, I don't know if that one is worse than COVID or which one, but that's another mass mind control psyop that the majority of people fall into. And they're determined to believe that. It's almost like, one of the first stages in taking over the world was to make everybody hate themselves. And what better way to do that than just tell you you're killing the planet? But I can almost guarantee you that most individual people are not the ones destroying the planet, but instead it's these multi-billion-dollar corporations putting out genetic pollution, chemical pollution, deforestation. These are all topics that they'll never talk about, but they will talk about the climate warming. And as you can see, it's not really warming. I mean, this was a pretty nice winter. And, on top of what you were saying, what are they going to say? I mean, who are they going to have left to blame it on when everybody's dead? They won't. They'll just have, These little orderly people that are used to a society where they take directions and it's like a prison. And you mentioned Planet of the Apes. They kind of lived in that society there on the old one at the beginning. You know how they were all in the onesie suits and they said they killed everything on the planet and that's why they made the apes in the first place. They wanted company.
You forgot the military in your list of naughty naughties. Like, see, that's one nobody wants us to touch with a 50-foot pole.
Yeah.
You got ships going 24/7. You got aircraft flying 24/7. You got manufacturing 24/7. You got an enormous amount of people moving around on road vehicles 24/7, and that thing never stops globally. All the militaries across the entire planet moving. If you were to cut that, you would reduce everything down into a fraction. Because companies are okay, they're part, but the militaries are where the main amount of like you look at how much is put into keeping this global fear of war going and the actual production thereof and distribution of implements for that. They're the main culprits. Don't talk about it. Inconvenient. It's you. Get a low flush toilet. Hey, anyway, David Devine right here. Yeah, 2030 loan for Ransom Godwin for 20 TV.
That's me, y'all. And I'm going to take a short 2-minute break. And I shall be back. Yo, look, I'm Max Headroom. Look in my eyes, they're blue. Now I'm just talking. What's going on in the chat? Let me get refreshed before we get back cooking here. It's punk rock. If you want to hear the song, you can go look at my music playlist where Max Headroom is on there, yo. It's on there. It's on there. Sorry about the fan, but I gotta get a little air in here for my 1-minute break. And a little coughing and getting offing. Don't tell nobody. It's our secret. Red face, yep. That's funny. Whoa. Good God. That's what I'm talking about. You can torture us, but you can't make me write bad checks. Oh, wrong one. Where am I? Here I am with my shifty Elite Cup 2019 hat, retro, which is not available at my store because I don't have a store. But you know what? I sent a nice 420 TV Freedomist film hat to the UK to a lucky sub that was wanting some seeds from me that helps out the channel all the time. Thank you, Miss Francesca. Doodle-doo-doo. Let's check out the chat room here. Say what now? Oh. Plant. Max. Max is in here. He was. I don't know.
Is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. Thank you for joining. We're having a great conversation talking about the distractions, the availability of life itself, and the things that we've all become accustomed to, and where it might move from this point as we transition into something different and new ways of lives. And remember, as this is a listener-supported station here, and the topics we talk about are completely banned on most social media, and we've all had our experiences with shadow banning and outright deleting of videos or deletion of channels. So the things we talk about, we've walked the walk, had the deletion of the talk. So if you find this valuable, consider a donation right here, freedomslips.com, right at the top on the nav bar. Different ways to support channel production here with the producers that keep us and you listening, that equalize our sound and make sure that we're on time and put the feed out through different venues here and keep the chat boards going. But with that said, anybody in the Southeast U.S. coming up in the next couple of days, we talked about this in the very beginning of last hour. I had a point I'd written down on a note before we took the break. The dust storm that's coming in here, it's really thick down in Florida at the moment, but over the next few days, it's going to transit right over where I live in East Tennessee. So the two things I'm expecting, and what the forecasts are showing here, are about 3 inches plus of rain over 4 days, which would feed right into those particulates making an enormous amount of rainfall. Now, today and yesterday, it was the most blue sky you've ever seen, but the sun was so intense, it was like being cooked in an ionized microwave oven. I can't describe it to you. Even though the temperature was only 86 degrees Fahrenheit today, 87 at the top, it felt like it was 115 in the desert. It was like a blowing ionized wind of complete dryness. And I've experienced this once before in Taiwan when I was living over there, before a dust storm from the Gobi Desert swept down over the island chain. It blasted everything with such a heat ion wind that it fried the plants on our balcony on one side. I am experiencing the same thing yesterday and today in earnest. It was incredible, the effects from the sun with this. Maybe it's microparticulates picking up a charge, but they're flying through the air right now. And it was like being cooked. Like I say, it felt like desert wind. The things I'm looking for, if you're going to follow the Adapt 2030 channel and some of the live feeds over tomorrow and specifically Saturday when the rain starts, are the electrified skies and the electrified storms that are coming through, preceding the front along with the wind, the color change at sunset, and again, hoping to see some electric sprites above the front. So I'm going to have the cameras in 2 different directions, trying to pick up on some of these electrical ferocities and different kind of electrical events that preceding the storm front with all of this ion flux that's in this. And when I say they're not negative ions, the one that make you feel good, these are the positively charged ions that create chaos in society. So with that being said, we're going to be looking at electrified skies. So Ransom, welcome back for the second hour. We kind of stopped off talking about artificial shortages here because of the hack in the computer system driven by incredible excuses. You know, all-time record crop pricing, all-time water pricing, so herdsmen can't keep their herds. And there's the whole portrayal in the news that somehow all the stoppage of beef production and pork production in the United States is blamed on a little computer hack by one company, and then everything else in the entire nation shuts down.
And our oil.
And California has emptied all of its water out into the ocean. So I mean, that's where it stopped. Makes no sense to me here. What's going on?
Yeah, and don't forget about the oil. The oil got hacked. We got hacked. All of a sudden we're having hack problems. You know how convenient being hacked really is? Anytime there's an edict from the top, any companies can just say, well, we got hacked. You know, oops, sorry, nothing we can do about it. It's ransomware. You know what? We decided to embezzle, I don't know, $1 billion. We'll just pay it to ransomware. And then you see our government acting like things like this are up to the private company when normally they would be all up in there trying to control the situation because of it being considered a threat to national security if our companies are being hacked and ransomware, right? But you didn't see any of that from our government. It was just, shh, don't worry about it. It's because the economy's bad and there's problems getting you things because hackers and climate change and because of the, everybody's got to deal with this new pandemic. Poor us, we better, keep the faith and do our part. It's a lot like duck and cover too, the whole thing. You were joking about those masks. Maybe people in Florida will actually have a reason to wear those stupid things when the dust is falling out of the sky. You think? I don't know. But you're right. Every time I look up something like, the power shortage in Texas, I find out there was an executive order from the executive branch telling them to go ahead and turn it off and reduce the amount that they're going to need because we don't want to put a bad carbon footprint and it's part of the Green New Deal and don't worry about it. Just turn off the energy. And they know the repercussions of doing this, and we talk about grid downs due to the sun or, things like that, but the most common grid down is government failure. And the most common way for any human in history to die is through democide, which is death by government. And then you have to go back to what we were saying. It's not just a government. It's not just your government where you live in your country. It's a global governance. Who's running the global governance?
Well, the same people, and I want to go back to when you were talking about the Bolshevik Revolution and all the people dying from starvation. Word to anybody listening. The farm implements to grow the food was confiscated along with the seed supply. So they understood the farmers were smart. They went out and dug in the fields and hid a whole bunch of bags of seed everywhere. But what they did was they took away their ability to actually plant the seed and farm the seed. So as the army went through and went door to door on the farms, and you got to think about how remote the farms were then compared to where it is now, like how much faster this could occur. Because let's step back half a century, even a full century. Like when you consider remote countryside, even 100 years ago, you're considering really incredible remote. But they were still able to go out there, the Soviet army, and find all these places that people were farming. And then the number one thing was confiscating the machinery. That's what caused the starvation. And then they put up the blockade zone around that, which did not allow export out or import in of seed or machinery. So they put up a giant zone where nobody could come in or out and just let everybody starve in there, which was such a sad thing. And when we come into 2024 here, for those of you who follow the Adapt 2030 channel, this second magnetic field forming, July and August are the 2 months that it's going to be seen some great effects as we swing past with our Earth into this magnetic coupling, which will be structurally sound through 2024. So once Jupiter's going to pass the Earth coming up in July here, Jupiter's going to sweep past the Earth in its outer band. But once that does, we're going to be locked into that magnetic coupling all the way until 2024 of October. So there's going to be an enormous amount of Earth cracks, Earth slides, and rifting of the crust. So if you're already talking about hacks of like the Colonial Pipeline, this makes sense because maybe it was a practice run to see how long it would take before people would panic and shortages. But if you knew that the planetary alignments coming up were going to create a second magnetic field affecting the Earth's crust and our infrastructure, you would want to practice what a pipeline down situation would look like. So now we're into the real world scenarios using hacks to simulate what would happen in a real pipeline down, a real bridge down, a real railroad down because of Earth rifting effects. And how are we seeing it now? Non-deliverables happening across the entire world on a global level of non-delivery, non-production, shortages. Is that because it's shortages, or is it because of maybe they're planning into the future where those railroad tracks aren't working, those highways aren't working, those bridges are non-functional, and they're playing it out? How many things can be real life now? They're getting you used to shortages. Okay, that's the same thing that people are going to have to get used to in the food, the rationing times. Your availability and your accessibility to goods that you can purchase, limited. It's not available on Amazon, you can't buy it. It's not available in your store, you can't buy it. It's limited, you know? So how many real world scenarios can play out here? I'm talking about planetary effects magnetically affecting the Earth's crust and all the delivery systems being affected by that. Road, rail, bridge, pipeline, conduit, and when I say that, I mean like fiber optics. Ripped and shredded across the planet over the next 3 years, starting in July and August. And that whole landslide off of West Africa that buried all those cables, that's a perfect example. You can't tell me this is all playing out in real time right now. Come on, I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. Something else is going on. That's the distraction. That's the distraction. The hack, not the magnetic field.
Say what?
You on mute?
Yeah, I messed up the button. I don't think that people are ready for any of that stuff, especially railroad tracks and trucks not coming because of no gas. Because I've seen it just at the store during this. You know, I'm kind of glad that they threw this pandemic, or I'll put it this way so I don't get in trouble. I'm glad the pandemic happened because I got to see a few things on what would happen in a real life scenario. So when people really were panicking about things, and it's cool also because it relates to like if you've ever been in a city when a hurricane's coming and you actually see how the last minute preparations are of most of the public, and you see how fast products disappear. I'm kind of glad that this kind of pandemic happened. It was like a hurricane for the whole world. On one hand, you got to see how many people would just believe everything that they heard. And on the other hand, you got to see how many people would question what was going on. But more than that, you got to see what would happen with the commercialism that we have. And what I saw was pretty scary. If you remember, the stores were stopping selling seeds. You remember that? They told people that it was non-essential to buy seeds. And then they started, practicing other products, just shelving off the whole store. You remember all of that. And then at the same time, the only part that they let you go in, 6 by 6 feet by 6 feet in there one at a time, was into the food aisles. And we were joking at the time that it was reminiscent of the fall of the Soviet Union. But I think that was literally, I wasn't the only one watching. There were probably think tanks, lots of think tanks, sitting there analyzing every movement of the public and what they got them to do. So they realized, just like I did, that the public is completely unprepared. And when it happens, I'm going to say 90% of people are going to I'm going to call it a little bit. It's kind of like suicide in a way. They're going to do a bunch of bad choices that are going to lead to a big percentage of people making themselves not available just from bad choices in just the first wave of things. And then we've talked ad nauseum about the other problems. There's other groups, diabetics, et cetera, that aren't going to be able to deal with not just the supplies not coming, but they can't even travel if things like this start happening. There's going to be nobody out repairing road for if you've traveled down any highway in the U.S., in about a year it starts falling apart and getting potholes, and then they're out there, fixing it again. It's road work has never. I've never traveled on Interstate 40, for example, without a big stretch of it being under construction. So I can just imagine what would it be like if those people no longer went to work and fixed the roads or plowed the snow or any of these other things people take for granted.
See, and here's where I want to delve off into the ancient past, where so many buildings in Italy, it's incredibly difficult, even with today's cranes and pneumatic devices, to destroy the concrete made in Italy, say, circa 500 to 2,000 years ago, when they all used volcanic dust in the concrete mix, because those shards or whatever shape they would take would interlock and interlace with each other. So my whole question has been, why would we not use the same building techniques that are nearly impossible to destroy today to create the roads that we have? Would we not use the same concrete mix of using volcanic dust to interlace everything that is in that lattice that creates the bond layer for the concrete that we would lay down, where it would be a one-time lay that you would literally hundreds of years in the future, they couldn't even break it up because it's so solid. Yet continually, again, it comes back to that whole global, you're creating global warming. Yeah, well, you're running cement factories because you're putting substandard building materials on the roads, and you're running a bunch of asphalt using the detritus from the bottom of the barrel oil refinery. Once you take the naphtha off and you get into the different gasoline blends and you work your way down to the bottom tar layer, what are you going to do with that? Oh, we can't put it anywhere. Oh, we're going to make roads out of it. Dude, that's a great idea. People will pay us to get rid of our waste. Global warming. Are you kidding me? Oh, how about volcanic dust for the concrete mix so we never need to repair another road ever again? Where would the oil company put all their bottom of the barrel garbage? Because when you crack a barrel of oil, you only get probably the 50% is what we consider liquids. The rest of it is tar. That stuff that's on the roads. Like the same thing, I'll go back into oil for a second here. You go over to, let's say, the Caspian Sea Basin. This might be a little, I'm going to weave this idea to you. When you go up to the Caspian Sea Basin, they have heavy sour crude, which means there's a huge amount of sulfur in it. So what they need to do is separate the sulfur out of what we understand like a liquid barrel of black oil. Because there's so much sulfur in it, and they got like Himalayan-sized mountains of this sulfur before they can put it on the international market. You get sweet crude somewhere coming out of like the Norwegian basin or something. That stuff, wow, nothing. It just goes right into the refineries. But you got heavy sour. You need to refine that before it even can go into a refinery. So what happens? All that sulfur is pulled out, but where do they put it? It's a waste product. So they haven't really learned how to, or at least in our society yet, come to this point where they can find sulfur and turn it into a product that can be blended into the landscape that's considered essential infrastructure, because sulfur, pretty soft stuff. So how do you take a waste product? If you're looking at tar sands production too, you go up into Alberta. What was that? Further up in northern Alberta there, they tried the same thing, because after the extraction of the tar, they boil it in hot water and they have all this detritus and waste out of that. In the beginning, the oil companies were like, dude, we're going to repave all your roads. But after the roads were, 3 feet tall and people were skidding off the side of the roads because it was 3 feet tall and crashing because the roads were so perfect, they ran out of places to put it all. And then they had those big ass tailing ponds that went out, and there's like hundreds of miles of pond of wastewater stuff destroying everything. You see how the whole narrative is falling apart now. So wait a second, the waste was the waste that you need to now. It's a substanding building material that's going to rift and crack anyway. It's almost like, it's almost like somebody knew these cycles and they put the society up to extract as much as they could for a wealth building or a carryover into the next society's steps or whatever that is into 2030 after we get through this planetary magnetic anomalies and earth rifts, cracks until we get into 2030, 31, 32 before it ends and we start to go back to some normal growing seasons and earth stability again. Like there's an enormous amount of extraction of different types of gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and other wealth minerals at this last juncture up to now. But now it's all a fire sale. They don't care. Everything's being restructured, burnt to the ground for what? And where is all that going to and being held until the carryover and the restructuring of the next society with cryptocurrency and the faster way to do things and the energy movement in a faster way for this new, because once fiat's done and you're terrified to even hold fiat because it's all hyperinflated, you're going to have gold, silver, and crypto, which is carried to the next world. Where's everything else that's being carried to the next world? That's been manufactured at the sacrifice of this world. Because it's been business as usual, status quo for the last 200 years. Not even question the institutional, step-by-step, old banks, old institutions, old stock markets, old companies, valuations moving your way, whatever it was rock solid for 200 years. And then just 2 or 3 years ago, we decided to throw it all away and restart something, and all this wokeness and ridiculous change of society. Everybody sees it happening, but they're just questioning why it's happening. Well, the entire thing's about to dissolve anyway based on solar cycles. So who or what knew these solar cycles were coming to extract all these minerals at the cost of the earth? Because the earth's going to shift and reform itself anyway during this time. So it didn't matter what we did to the planet. It's all going to reform itself anyway. The enormous amount of volcanic eruptions, land subsidence, landslides, all these things are going to change. Wouldn't even matter. We can't even dent the earth. Like people who say we're doing too much damage to the earth, please, really, you don't even know the history of the earth, what's happened here. And the cataclysms, I mean, we were like an ant on the windshield, please. And then so whoever knew these cycles has figured out that whatever we sacrificed in the last 200 years in terms of getting us up to here, something was extracted over these last 200 years. And now we're all being sacrificed and sent out to the wolves in these 4 to 5 years. And we're coming to this magnetic field anomaly. Man, something's changed. And then we're going into crypto and whatever. There's something far more nefarious and scripted and known timelines taking us through these changes.
I agree. When you were sitting there talking about the oil and how they can't get rid of the certain parts of their product, so they have
the bitumen. Yeah, they call it, the actual proper term for that is bitumen. That after they do the tar sands extraction and they do a bitumen, well, what are they going to do with that?
Yeah, so they got to find some place to put it, and they're not allowed to just throw it away into the environment. It sounds real similar, and what's funny is you started out with the concrete manufacturing. In order to do that, we need a fluorosilicic acid. Or at least that's a byproduct of whatever they do to make concrete so you can have it in a bag. But they're not allowed to just go dump that in any lake or stream or river or in the ocean. They can't just dump it in, on land and let the land absorb it. They'll get fined by the EPA. It's horrible. It's acidic, toxic. But what they can do is sell it to the city municipalities, and they can put it in your water so you can drink it and have nice teeth. It's funny. It's another one of those things. They didn't have any place to put a product because of the laws, so they found some place in a gray area where it's not against the law, making human beings basically the filter for their toxic waste. It was just like right on par. You're talking about just making the roads. The entire system is set up to be a failure, to crumble, to degrade what's there. From the human being all the way to the roads. You're right. Why don't we use known, better techniques to do things? It's so that you have to buy a new product. It's just like if you were to buy an iPad when they first came out, you would know now that even if you kept it in pristine condition and it was completely, brand new and mint condition, it wouldn't be able to be used for anything because they obsoleted it by changing all the operating systems, the protocols, etc., where your device doesn't do anything. And from what I've been reading into the auto manufacturing, this is also going in the same path where the cars will now be AI. They won't let you drive. And not only that, it'll become obsolete in a few years, so you'll have to buy another one. And if you are a rich person, you might be able to afford the special licensing and insurance it would take to drive a gas-powered car down these oil roads that I'm sure they're still going to use oil to make on the roads, even though your AI car may slam into a semi while you're watching Harry Potter in the back seat.
One word for you, naphtha. And any of you who have a natural gas well on your property, you're going to get that condensation, or that what they call condensate, coming off where the pipes are connecting because it's too cold. Because when you're pulling the gas out of the ground, obviously you're going to get that, like we do everywhere. Pipes are going to get cold. And if you can drip it off like you would a still, you can get something called naphtha. And I was talking to an old guy, this old guy who used to do oil well drilling, and like, man, we would all take the naphtha and just take barrels of that in our back trunks and drive across the country, because there was more calories in that thing if you're going to look on a calorific basis than even 98 fuel is. Like, dude, this is like 120 octane kind of stuff. Naphtha. And they're like, just get the condensate coming off the wellhead, So if any of you have natural gas out there, you can make a liquid fuel by taking the condensate that's dropping off. And if you do something like you would do refining our distillations on regular alcohol, you could do something very similar. So you could run it through your distillate extraction and throw the cold water on that to make it even cooler, and then drop that out into a liquid form. There's a lot of ways around this. So if you think liquid fuels are going to go away, you're well mistaken, because just like I was talking about, distilling alcohol burns as long as it's at a higher octane. So you're looking at, Everclear is a perfect example. Anybody know Everclear? You could burn that in your car. You could also produce that in your home if you know how to distill, but you have to do like a triple distillation to try to get that to the higher, alcohol levels. But still, I'd say one last thing here. One of the reasons I've been reading a lot about alcohol distilling, because I believe it is the future for us as a homesteader, or anybody out there. You can use it to make your own rubbing alcohols. So if you have any fruit or any grain, you can make alcohol. And that's great. And then it stops there. The conversation goes, are you going to get drunk a lot? Okay, that's for the simpleton. But if you take it out a little bit further, if you triple or double distill it, you can get higher and higher proof on the alcohol that you're producing. So I'm looking at making my own medicines. Once you make a tincture, if you have something that's in the 95% range, you can put that into the water. If it's a aqueous distillate, or if you're using water to take out the constituent in your herb or whatever it is, you can add alcohol in there to keep it for a very long time in a mason jar. Or you can actually distill and make your own rubbing alcohols that you would put directly on your wounds. Because you're working on a farm and we're in a grid down kind of thing. You're going to get cut all the time and you're going to get super infected. You got no alcohols or no way to clean your skin, you're going to have a serious problem. But in the third thing, it can run your car. And looking back in history, the whole thing about the prohibition, what was the stories that were fed for prohibition? The wives all started it. They were worried about their husbands drinking because the husbands were making moonshine somewhere. That's the whole story you're fed. But in actuality, all the farmers were brewing their own corn or whatever distillates, their own moonshines, and they were putting that into their automobiles and running for free. But that was the very same transition point where we talked about in the beginning of the show, 1913, electric cars got whacked at the knees, and suddenly these fossil fuel burning cars came out. And guess who's in the same place again? The energy companies, as we know, as Standard Oil, etc., were the ones who were selling the product to make the cars run, but the farmers were all producing their own fuels by making their own alcohols on the farms, which cut into their profit line. So what did they do? They got the same thing again. Reefer madness. Yep. We got prohibition, and it all circles back again. You cut out the profit, so then they made brewing your own alcohol, making your own, distilling your own alcohol illegal. because then you had to go buy the product directly from the petrol station again. And no kidding, you all try to disprove me on that. That is the true reason that prohibition came into being for alcohol.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly why. And at the same time, like you pointed out with the Reefer Madness, DuPont was coming out with a whole line of plastics, medicines, and other things that they needed to use petroleum. So they couldn't be having, this hemp people over here making all the same products. So they wanted to get rid of that too. Plus, they probably at the time also realized what a natural wonder hemp would be as far as biofuel and the fact that people could make it. Now, I hate to do this to you, David, but when you paint these visual pictures for me and my mind just goes down it, and I started thinking about that poor farmer out there in the Permian Basin or in Texas or Oklahoma or wherever they live, that's just farming, doing their thing, but they so happen to sell the rights to the oil, and they got a fracking machine or a natural gas thing or whatever it is that they got, a methanol well on their property. Now, when things go flip-flop in the economy and everything's crazy, there are still corporations with lots of resources, and this is one aspect we haven't really talked about. We talked about military, we talked about marauders and things like this, but don't forget the corporation and the stake that they have in the future. So they in their minds own these wells, these pumps, these places that are bringing raw energy out. And of course, they're going to be guarded or taken. It may be the military instead of a corporation, but you can bet that if you own a farm and you happen to, let the people know that you have some stuff there and you're renting it out or you're selling it or you're getting the money off the rights or whatever, however that works, you can bet that those people are going to come claim that portion. And you know what? We might as well just take your farm along with it since you're producing food. These are crazy scenarios. Now, if you have a farm and you don't have these things, of course, nobody's going to come looking. But what if you do have a farm and there's maps out there that were already taken of where these veins of raw materials run in the earth, like gold, silver, etc. And, they're going to come because they know it's there. And these are things that people don't even think about, that there are people with resources and groups with resources that actually can and will use those resources when things fall apart.
Hempoline.
Oh, yeah.
Is the proper name for that hemp substance you were talking about that runs vehicles. Yeah, hempoline that's a perfect example. Because when you look at the cartels and how much you talk about private militaries inside the industrial complex of a corporation, are you kidding me? Where they extract oil, they have private armies protecting those facilities, and it's way outside, governmental. These are private armies. Mercenaries is the proper term for them.
Yeah, they work for global governance and a central bank.
They do, absolutely. It's the highest bidder. These guys are rough. They've been through a lot of wars. They extract people and they say, hey, you give me money, you go over here, you protect this thing. Shoot anybody who comes by there, it's cool. No questions asked. Target practice, have fun. You guys drink as much as you want, shoot as many people as you want, but keep them off the property and no questions asked. And there is an enormous amount of sadistic people who love this kind of stuff. And if you even are 1/5 of 1/8% of kidding yourself that private armies don't exist on our planet, I mean literally private armies for hire with endless funds to go in and do any action in any location in any jurisdiction across the planet, you are not awake in any shape or form.
Boom. That's absolutely right. And that's exactly what I was talking about. We have things like Blackwater, and companies and groups you probably never even heard of. Some of them are off books. Some of them are shell companies. But you're right. The amount of private armies, that's kind of what I'm talking about. It wouldn't be even just one government. There's these governmental forces all across the planet. And I'm going to say most of which the common person doesn't even know about or has never seen or heard about. It's like at the top, past the echelon that we know about, into more of the pyramid that you'll never get to see. And the evidence of it not being there is evidence of it being there. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on when we're kind of looking for trends and things and the way things are going, is finding out known information from the past. But not just that, you have to read between the lines, and maybe you can't go around, talking about the Illuminati and everything. People think you're crazy, but when certain things all happen, you know that there's a force behind that. And if there's no visible force, you have to assume that that force is in the occult. And I kind of joked about 2020 would be the year that the occult came out in the open. And it kind of they did, because that's when we got to see the first broad stroke of global governance. Now, I don't know who's running it, an AI, extraterrestrial, you can go into woo-woo, but just say it's a group of greedy human beings. These greedy human beings have been playing chess with countries, with corporations, making things happen in a row so that they get certain outcomes. And you know that these people believe certain weird things by what they put out into the world. So if you know what's kind of in the occult realm, and then you kind of compare that to current events, you can kind of see a shadowy plan unfolding, kind of, if you want to get woo-woo. I don't think it's woo-woo. I think it's right there in your face, and that we're still arguing smaller points as far as a people coming to the realities that we don't want to face. And I think this last little push for a pandemic may have gone a little prematurely and woken too many people up, and that may be why it kind of seems haphazard. But even that probably was planned.
Yeah, I think that the narrative built behind the people too woke up too much. But you look at it, and at the power elite at the top, you're like, yeah, look at all these sheep. We can do what we want with them. Nobody's going to question anything. So you actually see that in real time happening right now with the pandemic. But your one point brought me back to that movie John Wick, and there's an enormous amount of ridiculousness with shootouts and things, and people got banged up that much with a bunch of lead flying through the air. There'd be a lot more the movie would have stopped early. But the whole premise I got out of that movie was what you talked about, that invisible layer of the way it really works at that echelons of private bodyguards and the hired assassins and everything that goes along with people trying to take out families, people to try to take out business alliances, people to try to take out business interests that stand in their way for the next move on the chessboard, all bought and paid for by those secret armies, and then those others behind, those protective, secret, protectors or whatever you would call them, that people are hiring all these private mercenaries and bodyguards to protect each other in the money realms of such opulence that we would consider like Greek gods and echelons in the Parthenon kind of opulence that goes on just on a daily level that is so far like 5,000x above us in terms of money. Not 50x. That's way too under. 500x, you're getting close. But you look at that John Wick things where these guys are all in castles and going around. I think there was a lot of truth to that movie.
I do too, especially their payment method, and you notice that.
Yes, the payment methods, right?
I've seen that in so many shows over the years that the true payment method is always some kind of gold or silver coins, and they're always printed in these movies in a way that like you've never seen that. You might have seen a bar of gold, but you've never seen that coin, and those coins were taken all over the world by every one of them. And another weird thing about that movie that you pointed out, John Wick, you notice that they have the blood oaths in there for the contracts and stuff like that, and favors that you have to abide by because you're part of that system and have to play by their rules.
Yeah, what are the rules we have to play by for the simpletons that think they can control everybody on top? Where do you and I sit in this whole thing? Because, all right, we're the nuisance class, I guess, would be considered. We're still down here we're not in the echelon of uber elite of billionaires and trillionaires, but we're in the nuisance class of, hey, they woken up too much and now they're trying to alert other people because they're awake. But they're still kind of, understanding that maybe we want to bring them into the next world because they have their own independent thoughts. They can't be brainwashed. They can't do this. And even trying to alert people by putting their own safety on the line, their own means of, going through the world on the line, and just try to alert people. And hey, they're set to their course, and those that set to the values. Like, I don't deviate. You can't buy me. I don't give it. Money means nothing. It's one of those things. It's the core value of either you believe in your belief or you don't. You sell yourself out or you don't. You lie to yourself or you don't. And that's where I sit. And my person like myself is is part of their club, but it's a danger to the, it's a danger to the elite, but they understand that allegiance to self, like you don't lie, you saw through, can't be brainwashed, can't be moved, can't be bought, you're like something different and rock solid about that, and I very much believe you're the same way, and others that I know too, just there's something that is far beyond money in terms of truth that needs to be put out, and risk to self, or going through, whatever happens to me happens to me. And I don't care as long as the message keeps continuing to go out. We have a huge problem with the food, and it's all related to these distractions we're seeing. And I will keep saying this to my dying breath,
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Who are we in that rung of things? I don't know. I think I'm the guy, that's not even in that movie, because I'm at home trying to prep for the future, and look at my cryptos and my little chips of gold that I've saved over the years and favors also. But you don't want to be that guy that's sitting there on their phone in the background wearing two masks at the drinking your coffee through a straw and get hit by a stray bullet, all from something that you don't even see. Because, I always think about that too. You were talking about how many bullets fly in that movie. And then the guy keeps just surviving and surviving and surviving. But they don't show all the people in the background in all these places that are probably dropping dead if something like that was happening. And what if something like that did happen? Do you think that the news media would cover that normally? Or would it just say, hey, we had another mass shooting today, and they used this gun or that gun? And speaking of that, I kind of wanted to take your, gamble, I guess is what it's called. It's kind of like a Deadpool. We always joke about what's the next big distraction, and it seems like the ones they've been using, like let's say disease or mass shooting or terrorism or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they've used these so many times that people's dopamine levels don't go up anymore. They're numb to it at this point. Think about some kid that was born after 2001. Their entire lifetime they've been bombarded with fear, porn, and propaganda the whole time. So nothing really, would shock them anymore. They don't even get shocked when, people their age are burning down cities and stuff anymore. So what would be the next distraction? It would have to be so big that it captures the imagination of people that have been on a 24-hour fear propaganda reel. The people that watch TV, the people that read magazines, newspapers, the people that go to these supposed colleges where they don't learn anything about their world, but instead learn how to disrupt the world, because that's the message coming down from the top, is we're going to disrupt.
I got an answer for you.
Go ahead.
Alien invasion. And how do you think that would do if the aliens blocked all our communication, or the aliens were in the skies? Like, how do you think that would disrupt society in itself? Alien invasion is the only possible way now. There's nothing else that could work, because it's all been human based so far. It's either going to be a massive comet that's visible, dropping all kind of meteorites into this earth and banging up stuff like the Carolina Bays, or it's going to be an alien invasion. There's only two possibilities. So how would that change our society? Either one.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was alluding to. I mean, there's nothing left. Like if we went to a sci-fi library and we didn't watch the movies, but we just put in a bunch of phrases and it gave us all of those movies, you would come out with a bunch of apocalyptic scenarios. And then if you took a magic marker and you started going down the list, and you're marking them off, you'd realize there's only a couple that are left. And that's some kind of nuclear exchange, a worldwide war, beyond anything we've seen in the past, or an alien invasion, or another pandemic that actually kills a large portion of the population. It's kind of like we only got 3 scenarios to look forward to. And if you watch the news and movies, you could literally cross these scenarios out. We've already had terrorism. We've already had this and that. Just start crossing them out. And the only thing left is biblical proportion type things. Hello? Did we get cut off? We may have lost transmission. The Russians did it. Let's see.
The Russians, the aliens did it.
No, he's still there. All right.
Now, what was that movie? Remember back in the day, it was with the aliens. They didn't like to be by the water, and it was the guy who did Braveheart? What was the movie's actor's name?
Oh, you're talking
Got
about
in trouble for
the Signs, where the aliens were afraid
The
of the
Sign.
water.
Yeah, that movie.
Yeah.
That was very similar. I could almost expect that as a preconditioning, preconceived programming idea of they fed you how it would be.
Yeah, and you better not
Think
go
about
to the
that.
cornfields, right?
Very few people even came in contact with them. They were down. Most of it was on the news. A couple of people had a few weird things, and then they left, right? And then it reshaped society.
Right, and not only that, the movie was about people that had a farm, and they were out there alone with the aliens. Why were the aliens checking out a corn crop?
But remember one thing they said, they were all afraid to go near the water. They anywhere there was a lake or a river or a stream or something or whatever, they were terrified of water. Because remember that guy, who played Caligula in one of those Roman movies.
Yeah.
I'm very bad with actor names, so
guy
any
with
of
the
you who are
hairline.
watching, I'm not good with remembering. I'm not really a fan of I get zero credit. They're good actors, okay, but I just can't remember their names a lot because it's like I like watching movies, but I'm not a fan of movies where people are like, oh, they're so famous. It's another person, right? Okay.
Right.
But the guy he wound up, he hit those glasses and it exploded with the water, and all the aliens it was like acid on them or something on their skin, the water or H2O. It was the weirdest thing is water in a water form completely destroyed their skin, but breathing our air, which is 45% water, had no effect on them.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Silly. Maybe that's why California dumped all their fresh water, so they didn't offend the aliens.
But it's still in the atmosphere, so you're going to breathe water vapor too, right? So the things were so offended by water or terrified and burn all their skin, but you breathe in water. Like, come on.
Yeah, I noticed that most of these things are like that on those movies. There's always these illogical things that the aliens have. I guess that's so you don't really take it too seriously in the meantime and start thinking about stuff. Like what if they're insecticides? Do we just spray them with a bottle of neem oil and get rid of them?
Living on a farm out here, I do not like to use chemical, and I'm very in my ways of not using it as much as humanly possible, not using it. But there are some times where I don't care what natural remedy you're using, you cannot get rid of these pests. And at that point, I gingerly and very lightly use something to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Not nearly at the levels of most people, but like these carpenter bees last year or this year, I couldn't get rid of them, so I had to use a little bit of spray. And I got some fungal from the cedar rust back on the apple trees, so I used a tiny bit of spray from the 7 to try to, get the leaves back in order again. Because I couldn't do that naturally. Neem oil didn't help at that point because it was cedar rust on the apple tree leaves. So, in this day and age,
somebody in the
try to do the best I can, but it is all about farming.
Yeah. Well, I don't think neem oil's too bad. I mean, it comes from a tree, I think. Somebody in the audience was pointing out that old show and movie that was real popular in the 80s, Alien Nation, all of the aliens on there would get burned by salt water. They couldn't be around salt water.
I don't remember that movie.
It's the one with the bald
that
aliens, and they just, like a billion of them, it's a couple million of them, but whatever. They just show up in a UFO over LA, and we accept them into our society, and then, everybody's racist towards the aliens. But, it was kind of a weird show, and it got kind of popular in the 80s. I remember that. It was these bald guys with weird spots all over their head. They looked human.
I'm a bald guy. If I put weird spots on my head, would people be like, hey, he's from the 80s?
I guarantee you, if you put little brown spots all over your head in a weird pattern, somebody's going to say, hey, I love that show.
No way. Hey, come and visit me. I'm gonna give you steaks on my farm so you don't have to eat lab-grown meat. You can come out. I know a couple guys who sell half cows out here. We can get 800 pounds of meat.
Yeah.
Get a nice barbecue going on. I will not let anybody starve if you come on out to the farm. We can have real meat, no lab-grown meat. We'll put, we'll drop.
Well, hey, maybe that's really a good thing for the prepper. We could just sit around eating microgreens, growing growing ribeyes made out of our own meat or family members, some nice blood sausage to keep us over.
No, I will tell you one thing. If you're going to actually look for meat at this point where things are going to get incredibly expensive, you can still get meat for about $4 a pound, maybe a little bit under, depending on how much you buy, from a farmer who slaughters their own cow and then will process that meat for you and then give you the cuts. Now, a lot of it's going to be wrapped up, but it's going to be bulk. So if you're looking at the T-bones, you might have to slice between the T-bones themselves to make the steaks out of them, but they'll give you, and it'll be like a 20-pound, rib section there. Or they'll give you the ground beef, and it'll be like 40, 50 pounds of ground beef at one, in a ground beef, but it'll be a pack of 50 pounds of ground beef. Whatever steak loins you're going to get, the chuck roast, whatever it is, the flank, it's all going to be in a bulk kind of thing. But if you're sharing that with other people and you know what you're doing and you can butcher a little bit of meat, like you talked about, you used to do a ton of butchering before, buying a quarter cow or half cow from somebody else and getting 200, 400, 800 pounds of meat at a very affordable price compared to what you're going and getting it in the supermarket for $16 a pound, there's no comparison whatsoever. And then one thing I learned over these last, how many months trying to get things to root out and grow properly, willow trees. If anybody has access to any willow trees, there's a natural rooting hormone inside there. So my latest trick is going out to my willow trees, stripping a bunch of branches and leaves off, making it into a poultice, and then throwing it out when we're trying to plant stuff to give that rooting hormone an extra thing inside the soil. So seems to be working pretty well.
That does
There's a lot
work.
of, when we're coming to, you're going to be self-sufficient. You got to get talking with the people who are self-sufficient around your community.
You just explained a mystery to me because I was totally ignorant to it. But a neighbor of mine gave me a bucket of weeping willow branches, and I kind of left them outside too long. And they grew the little roots on the bottom, but I figured they were mostly dead because I left them so long in the nasty water. But I planted the whole thing with a rose stem, and the rose stem came to life too, which I wasn't expecting. I just kind of threw it in there for whatever. But the willow tree just came right to life as soon as I gave it dirt.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of the rooting hormones, you can buy a little bottle of rooting hormone and you can dip your plants in that. That's from the willow tree. Like aspirin's from the willow tree, but the same thing, that rooting hormone's from a willow tree. So you want to talk about miracle trees. Okay, there's moringa, like Moringa oleifera. That's the highest vitamin C content. If you can read all about Moringa oleifera, it's this superfood miracle tree. It'll cure everything from AY to Z and give you super nutrients along with far above spirulina. If you add those two together, it's like a magic mix. But at the same time, you get the aspirin and the rooting hormone. So this is another miracle tree as well. And if you do some things with the bark and tinctures and ultrasonic extractions and you can, the willow tree is just an amazing tree in itself. So it's a top one to grow, medicinal. And how many other benefits are with the willow tree? I mean, Native American Indians just use that for like 50 different things, from weaving and barks and all. The barks can be real supple and you can create baskets. There's a huge amount of things you can do with that. You can filter water with it. It's endless amounts of things you can do with a willow tree. And they all grow back. You cut that thing down to a nub on the land and it comes right back.
Yeah, it's amazing. It makes me think, I've had a lot of trouble here in the desert growing trees, like little fruit trees and stuff like that. They usually always die, either because of the winter finally or just the super summer heat and sun. It makes me wonder maybe if they would get a little bit better if I planted a willow stem in there with each one of them, which, that wouldn't hurt either because it gives your small tree some shade. I don't know how that works. Would one kill the other or whatever, but I'm telling you, I didn't expect it was a dried up rose stem, and I just threw it in there, and it came to life along with the willow stems.
Yeah, the thing is, willows need an enormous amount of water. That's why you put them that's why they always grow near stream beds. So in a water situation, this is another emergency thing. If you are looking for water, and if you see a bunch of willow trees, go toward those, because that's where the water is. And pawpaw trees, too, if you know what pawpaw is, it's a fruit that grows in the southeast U.S.
Yeah.
Pawpaw trees, they can only exist in super wet. Like I planted, 16 of them this year. They were all along the river or the stream beds on my property. They'd grow nowhere else except in low-lying stream, low-bottom areas. Willow trees are very the same. You put a willow tree in a dry area, you got a dead willow. You put it in a wet area, swampy kind of place, man, things going off. So you can actually cut it and, you know, get some water out of there in an emergency situation. But you would just go to the creek where it's growing right next to there and find your water. So if you're ever in a pinch where you're like, I can't find water, follow the willow trees.
It makes me wonder if...
But they need to be super wet. So in a desert area, I've never heard of a willow growing in a desert. But, I mean, if you gave it enough water, it would.
Yeah, a couple of my neighbors have them, too. I think there's an aquifer far enough down that once they get to a certain size, they're all right. I was wondering if you couldn't purposely plant willows at the top of where you're farming, so where you kind of water the tree and then everything downstream from it gets a little bit of these hormones you're talking about.
Yeah, you'd want to rip a bunch of the tree down, and every time you have a chance, prune it off, and then throw the branches and stems right into where the water flow was, so they would naturally extract that out of there.
You learn something every day on 420 TVs. You see that? No.
You do. Take the willow, use it to your advantage. Yeah, because you prune it, because the more you prune it, the more it grows. Like moringa's the same way. The more you prune it, the more it grows. So you're going to try to prune down as much as you can on the willows, throw it in your water source, wherever you're going to irrigate it and everything, and let that and you know, rooting and growth hormone come out. It's a rooting hormone when the plants are starting, but it's a growth hormone while the plants are growing. So use it to your advantage. We got tons of willows. I cut it a lot. I try to cut my willows a lot, you know, because they always get a bunch of hibiscus stuff growing up in there. Thanks for listening to us tonight. We went all the way from the Bolshevik Revolution to the hack, the Bitcoin, and all the way into getting self-sufficient on some ideas about sticking your own food.
Well, alrighty then. I had to turn that off. It gets very noisy at the end there, trying to do it through the phone. But for some reason, there's always a problem through Skype. So thank you guys for joining me, even though it's kind of low-tech meets high-tech here on 420 TV. But anyway, that's all I got for right now. I should have some new shows. I've been trying to work on that, catch up on all my work. But I think my channel's going to get a lot more active, like with me on it all the time. Because I got a lot of shit talking to do, and like I have to get it off my chest, and you guys are the only ones that'll listen. How about that? Peace out. It's 420 for me, and it's partly cloudy. At least I hope it is for you. Peace out. 1776.
You know, if I say something, I mean it. These things happen. Yeah.
If I ever said I'm never scared, just know I mean it. If I ever said I fuck your bitch, just know I mean it. And if I ever said I'm getting money, just know I mean it. And oh Lord knows, He knows I mean it. Yeah, you know I mean it. You know I mean it. Just know I mean it. Just know I mean it. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
If I say that shit, then I mean it. Listen, I'm telling you, it's my world. I does what I wish to. If you're mad, well, too bad. Sounds like a personal issue. I walk in, they all stare like, who the fuck is this dude? Kicks game is just rude. Don't get jujitsu. Tunnel visions, I get ahead. Stay solid, I never flat. My haters feel like I'm better dead, but I'm bottom line, getting better than that. With a better girl, with a better face, I'm in a better place, getting better head. I just want to stay broke forever. Yeah, that's that shit no one ever said. This year I'm in here, I'll spell it out to make things clear. Meanwhile, you're in near, I've got a lane and I'm in gear. People wonder who's next up, that conversation really ends here. You just talk a bunch, stress me out, I chop a Dutch. But my style is a lot to munch. Geez, dope, you might blow up. Think I know, I've got a hunch.
You know I mean it. just know I mean it. And if I ever said I'm getting money, just know I mean it. And oh Lord knows, He knows I mean it. Just know 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 I mean it. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. You know I mean it.
It's my world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you. It's my
You know
world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you. It's my world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you. It's my world. I does what I wish to. If you're mad, well, too bad. Sounds like a personal issue. Listen, I'm telling you. It's my world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you. It's my world. I does what I wish to. If you're mad, well, too bad. Sounds like a personal issue. I walk in, they all stare like, who the fuck is this dude? Kicks game is just rude. Don't get jujitsu. Tunnel visions, I get ahead. Stay solid, I never flab. My haters feel like I'm better than, but I'm quite alive, getting red and snap. With a better girl, with a better face, I'm in a better place, getting better head. I just wanna stay broke forever. Yeah, that's that shit no one ever said. Listen, I'm telling you, it's my world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you, it's my world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you, it's my world. I does what I wish to. Listen, I'm telling you, it's my world. I does what I wish to. If you're mad, well, too bad. Sounds like a personal issue.